Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next subject of our Threat Leadership Roundtable. We are looking at the cybersecurity professionals will see an increased emphasis on real-time security monitoring and analytics. This could be driven by regulation as well as strategic defense in-depth measures. We know, for example, that some regulation, such as the latest version of PCI version 4, is asking for a greater correlation of logs, and we can't do that manually. So with me today, I have Randy Blasik, our VP of Technology, and Joe Vigorito, our VP of Solutions Architecture. And I'd just like to kick off with that statement, guys. Are we going to be seeing more real-time monitoring and analytics? Randy, hand over to you.
Sure, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think we are. It seems like, having gone through in the past a lot of different exercises testing my security infrastructure in past roles. It seems like the name of the game is, number one, identifying the assets that you currently have. So what does your current attack surface look like? And then there's usually gaps there. There's unprotected systems that aren't really generating any sort of telemetry that the business is capturing. So they might be logging things, but it's not really going anywhere because we didn't, the organization didn't know that that exists was on-prem, right? So, and we're figuring this out. And so, as from an industry perspective, and so that's why we're pushing penetration and vulnerability tests. In a lot of different industries, these things are identifying gaps. And so. We're identifying those assets, and so these regulatory requirements are pushing the identification of these assets. Yeah. So Joe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, Randy, absolutely. So couple of things. The first thing I always tell people is, try in cyber not to get tunnel vision, right? Keep your thinking broad, because to have a comprehensive cybersecurity program, you need to focus on a whole lot more than just phishing and ransomware. That doesn't mean phishing and ransomware aren't prevalent and aren't important, but these real-time analytics and capabilities that we talk about, they fuel what we call the real-time enterprise, right? So the days of store it, look at it, data lake architectures, keep it, maintain it, go back and analyze it later on. It just doesn't work in the real world. It sounds okay in principle, but in the reality of it, it is just not going to offer you the type of rapid decision making that is needed in today's very fast moving and very dangerous or perilous environment. So what I tell people is, do you have mitigation and remediation cyber capability for what I like to call the top 10 risks? And I won't go through all of them, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention vendor risk management. How do you analyze who your vendors are, and do they fall under the same degree of purview as do your indigenous staff, your employees and workers? Do you have a system security plan? Randy, you and I speak a lot about that. Yeah, Mark mentioned logging and monitoring as it relates to PCI 4.0, data classification, configuration management, incident response. All of these areas are key, and they're all fueled by real-time monitoring and analytics. Then the last thing I'll say is, on a prior segment, we talked a little bit about cyber insurance. I've got some bad news for people. If you're doing business with a traditional insurance carrier, call them. Even if you're in the middle of a policy year, there's a fair chance you're going to either pay a lot more than you did in prior years, or you're going to have trouble getting your insurance renewed. You need to understand what we call residual risk because of the fact that you need to know how much risk are you carrying after all of your cybersecurity controls are in place and working, right? So, research continues to show that there's hundreds of millions of attempted cyber attacks occurring every day with malware on a steep upswing to the neighborhood of almost 400% as compared back 2 years ago into 2021. So what I tell organizations all the time, and Randy, you and I talk about this, and Mark, you and I talk about this, is with remote work in the post-pandemic era, bring your own device, third-party risks we already talked about, insider error and insider mistakes, and stepping into the cloud without necessarily having a good methodology on how to defend it. You need capabilities to have complete visibility, analysis of risk, and an architecture that is completely manageable, understandable, and that you can report out of. And if you don't have that combination of things in your environment, along with that continuous security monitoring capability, you're going to have a problem mitigating and remediating threats every minute of every day. So, hopefully that all makes sense. Randy, anything you want to add on to those points?
Well, Joe, I think you hit the nail on the head. So there's really not much more that I have. I think we're also running up against time. But one thing does come to mind, and I think it's coming up in a future, in our final prediction, which that dawned on me when you were going through sort of the list, was the role of the CISO in an organization, and how it's evolving. So Mark, I think you have the official title of that next and final event that we have. Mark, do you have?
Yep, the title of our next event is "The Role of the CISO is Harder and More Perilous Than Ever Before."
Absolutely.
That's what we're going to be covering.
I look forward to getting into that. It's one of my pet subjects.
Okie doke. Well, with that then, guys, as we say, looking at regulation and more automation, then anybody has any questions, please contact us. But that's as I say, that's a wrap for this subject, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks
very
everyone.
much.
Thank you.